They're creepy and they're kooky, mysterious and spooky. They're all together oaky, the Addams Family. Their house is a museum where people come to see them. They really are a scream, the Addams Family. Neat. Sweet. Petite, so get a witch's shawl on, a broomstick you can crawl on. We're gonna pay a call on the Addams Family.
Whether in cartoon form, on television, or at the movies, the Addams Family has intrigued audiences for decades. And why not? The blend of humor and horror has long been a staple of American entertainment. People love to laugh at the things that should frighten them. There's something about poking fun at death and morbidity that takes the chill out of the inevitable. And nobody did that better than cartoonist Charles Addams. In the early 1930s, he began dealing with such topics as witchcraft, voodoo, black magic, and the occult. Freaks of nature and other human or inhuman oddities. Cannibalism, ancient rituals, and tribal sacrifices. In the 50s, he indulged himself in space travel and extraterrestrials, as well as monsters and madmen in everyday life, and virtually anything else from the lunatic fringe. As the public quickly began recognizing the cartoons of Charles Addams, they screamed for more. Addams soon became known for his unique style and controversial content when it came to his masterworks of cartoon artistry. His style was easily recognizable, and a strange subject matter became his signature, opening up the world's eyes to dark humor and taboo topics throughout the 30s, 40s, and 50s. He produced his most widely acclaimed series of drawings in the early 1950s, when he introduced that strange new family in the pages of the New Yorker magazine. They were seen in numerous creepy cartoon situations over the next several years, and audiences wanted more. Addams listened, and he continued to feature this frightful family. It became apparent that these characters had almost taken on a life of their own, so Addams published a collection of these drawings titled Homebodies in 1954. It featured his yet unnamed family getting on with the duties of everyday life. From mom and dad enjoying a gloomy day with the kids, to reading a classic holiday story on the night before Christmas with a peculiar twist. But although this family may have at first appeared just a little off-center from the most eccentric neighbors down the street, we soon learned that their stature as America's first family of fright allowed them their own gloomy Victorian mansion and butler to help run the household in typical Addams style. The husband and wife appeared to be a man and woman of leisure. Neither of them worked, and you didn't know whether it was because they didn't want to or didn't have to. Their two children were pretty much your average American kids, but again, with a twist. They'd much rather stay home from school to play with a pet alligator or make a miniature funeral wreath for the front door of a duck. Addams successfully applied a bizarre veneer across the American dream life of the 1950s and was hailed for his macabre view of the inhabitants of the strange new American household. The birth of Charles Addams' avant-garde drawings helped establish him as a world-renowned cartoonist and gave him the opportunity to further develop his skill at following this recurring theme throughout the 1950s. Addams once admitted that he had a personal preference for one character in particular. This was the short little bald man with a big nose. The reason was that the character was basically a caricature of Charles Addams himself. Now watch Addams at work while he draws the cartoon self-portrait in this rare video demonstration recorded several years after his retirement from the New Yorker. In 1963, producer David Levy was struck with the idea of transforming the cartoons of Charles Addams' Freaky Family into a weekly TV series to be played out by real actors. He went directly to Addams himself, who at the time was still with the New Yorker, and he pitched him the idea. Addams liked what he heard, but Levy insisted that if the project was going to be a success, they would have to come up with a character description for each member of the cartoon family, as well as a name. They decided to call them the Addams Family, and Levy put together a deal which ultimately resulted in the family's primetime TV debut in ABC Television's fall lineup of 1964. Addams began working on some rough character descriptions and plot ideas to help transform his already infamous cartoon family to the small screen. But he let master producer David Levy take over from there with the actual casting of the performers for the show. After his initial involvement, Addams was pretty much out of the picture. For the Addams little girl, Wednesday, Levy hired 6-year-old Lisa Loring, a newcomer to acting, who at the time hadn't even learned to read yet. She simply repeated her lines, which were given to her by a coach just before the cameras rolled. The Addams son, originally named Pubert by Charles Addams and renamed Pugsley by ABC censors, would be played by another newcomer to acting, named Kenny Weatherwax. His only tie-in to television was that his uncle, Rudd Weatherwax, was Lassie's trainer. Uncle Fester became the name of the Addams caricature character, and he was delighted with Levy's choice of world-famous child star Jackie Coogan for the role. Coogan, it seems, wanted the role so badly that he actually shaved his head for the audition. Coogan won the role, hands down. Now, the witch-like grandmother character became known as Grandmama Addams, and she'd be played by another Hollywood veteran who auditioned strongly for David Levy. Her name was Blossom Rock, but in her earliest film and TV appearances, she went by Blossom MacDonald or Marie Blake. The Frankensteinian butler character was named Lurch, the sound of which evokes a vision of his truly monstrous frame. David Levy immediately hired 6'9" Ted Cassidy to play the role after seeing him duck into his office and growl, "Hello." The black-clad mistress of the Addams household was to become known as Morticia Addams. She would be played by Carolyn Jones, who had in 1956 received an Oscar nomination for her role of an offbeat beatnik in The Bachelor Party. And finally, the man of the house, a wealthy lawyer with an insane leer, became known as Gomez Addams. He was played by character man John Astin, who had made his film debut in the feature version of West Side Story.
I had done a movie for Filmways, which was the eventual producer of the Addams Family. And they had gotten some good preview cards on my performance in the movie. It was a film called The Wheeler Dealers with Jim Garner and Lee Remick. And they had a few projects that they wanted to talk to me about. A couple of movies and a television series. It turned out that the television series was an attempt to put the cartoons of Charles Addams on the air. And I went into this meeting and was told at the beginning that they were going to build the show around the butler, whom I would play, and it would sort of be the adventures of, and Lurch had not been named at that point. Well, I went away thinking this is not going to work. And I was trying to figure out what kind of makeup and lifts I would use and that sort of thing to play, how would I Hulk to play the butler. And I got a call from the show's creator and executive producer, David Levy, who said he was present at the meeting, but he didn't speak much. And he called me to a little tete-a-tete at the Beverly Hills Hotel in the Polo Lounge. And over a couple of martinis, he told me about his idea for the show. I remember him saying, "This is really Father Knows Best with different people." And he says, "I want you to play the father." So that's where Gomez began to take root. And he showed me a brief character description that had been written by Charles Addams, and it didn't have much detail. And it really had a choice of names, Rapelli or Gomez, and we chose Gomez. And at that point, I began to work on an approach to putting a static cartoon into a characterization.
Mr. Addams.
Talk to you about. They're going to crash.
You think so, huh? Beautiful. Beautiful.
You meant to blow them up?
Of course. Why else would a grown man play with trains? You want to blow the other bridge?
No, some other time.
Carolyn Jones, a former disc jockey and stock stage player, was born in Amarillo, Texas, and she began getting work in offbeat leads and supporting roles when she moved to Los Angeles. Jones appeared in over 20 films, and by the 1950s, even popped up on shows like Dragnet.
Saturday, October 10th, 10:16 p.m. It looked like we got our first break in the case. Like to sit down, miss?
Yeah.
The officers tell us they picked you up near First and Wall, is that right?
That's what they say.
You mind telling us what you were doing down there?
I went down to meet a friend.
With a gun?
I'm telling you, that gun's registered. I did it myself right after I bought it.
You employed?
Yes.
Where?
At a dress shop out on Wilshire Boulevard. Now, listen. I don't know what all these questions are about, but you better get in touch with the people who record things and have them check this gun again. I'm telling you, it's registered. I did it myself.
I'm sorry, ma'am. There's no record of it. Why'd you buy the gun?
I told you. I'm having trouble with my ex-husband. I bought it for protection. He's always coming around the house, causing trouble. I thought maybe I could scare him with it.
The blonde Carolyn Jones became a sexy brunette by the time the Addams Family started.
I had a great time with Carolyn. During the run of the show, we didn't socialize much. We socialized more after the show was canceled than, and we remained friends for years until she passed away. But during the run of the show, neither Carolyn nor I dated or went out together. We were both with other people, obviously. And I think we retained an attraction for one another that we were able to play in the show. And I remember calling her years after the show, been on the air, and I said, you know, I miss nibbling your arm. and she laughed. We knew no matter what, if the script was maybe a little off or something like that, although that was rare, any tough moment we could just look at each other. And the genuine sexual interplay that we had eye to eye was something that would get us in and out of any scene we wanted to play. Yeah.
Oh, the thorns are so much larger this fall.
Lovely, Morticia. You have such a way with roses.
1964 found Jackie Coogan making his comeback into the public eye, Uncle Fester. But his early beginnings found him co-starring with Charlie Chaplin in The Kid. In fact, by the time the Addams Family came around, he'd already been in show business for 47 years. Little Jackie Coogan, seen here as Peck's bad boy, won the hearts of movie audiences from the very start of his silent film days. And his career as an international child star found the world press interested in his every move. By the time young Jackie Coogan had 20 film credits to his name, he was reportedly a millionaire, 4 times over. But when he was old enough to collect his earnings, his parents refused to part with the money. They milked him dry. Sadly, Jackie would never collect his hard-earned savings. He was forced to leave home and sue his parents for his very own company, Jackie Coogan Productions Incorporated. The kid was tied up for years in a highly publicized court battle which helped bring about the California Child Actors Bill. The law became known as the Coogan Act and eventually protected all working children in theater, films, and TV.
This is my little daughter, Joan.
The kid's kid.
The man who was Fester led a truly interesting life. He married screen star Betty Grable in 1937, and although they divorced several years later, they did find time to work and dance together in the film College Swing, made in 1938.
Coogan was one of the most interesting people I have ever met. It was more fun to spend time with Jack than most people I can recall. Often we disagreed on many subjects, but Jack's experience and knowledge and flair, lust, gusto for life was so deep that he was a pleasure to be with. I spent a fair amount of time with Jack on tours, and I did a lot of publicity gigs with Jack, and he is an amazing, amazing character. He could fall asleep anywhere, anytime, any place, and wake up at a finger snap and do his bit, whatever it happened to be.
Although Blossom Rock's career wasn't as lengthy as Coogan's, she had been in vaudeville and film since the early 1930s. She was 68 when she joined the Addams family.
Blossom Rock played Grandmama. She was, unbeknownst to most fans anyway, Jeanette MacDonald's sister. And there was quite a contrast between the two as she played Grandmama. But she was a lovely woman, and she and my mother became friends, actually. They always went out to lunch whenever my mother was in Los Angeles or Blossom was in Washington, D.C.
What can I do for you?
It's about sending the children to school.
Ah, Mama's in charge of the education. She's in the guest room playing darts with Uncle Fester. She tutors the children in all the fine arts, music, painting, ballet. She's the long hair of the family, and a fantastic dart player.
Oh, you got his pen. Nipped him in the ear, didn't I? You think you can do better? You watch me.
This is the guest room?
Your friend.
I don't know. Weird, isn't he?
Lisa Loring, who played Wednesday Addams, was the youngest cast member, but she was only 2 years younger than young Kenny Weatherwax. Kenny reportedly felt uncomfortable with acting on the Addams family, and the amount of extra attention little Lisa received from the mostly male cast and crew didn't help Kenny's attitude about his new life as Pugsley Addams. On the set, the two children behaved very much like typical grade school-aged kids. Kenny would target his taunts, tricks, and practical jokes toward Lisa, just like any boy with a little sister. With a cast that consisted of grade schoolers and grandparents, the Addams family was truly a family. Now all they needed was a butler to complete the cast. Ted Cassidy was chosen for the role of Lurch, not only because of his huge frame, but because he showed the quiet and complex characteristics needed to portray the hulking servant. The character was based on two Boris Karloff movie roles, the Frankenstein monster, as well as Morgan, the homicidal mute butler from Karloff's The Old Dark House, a variation on the monster theme. Cassidy's size and resonant voice made him a shoo-in for the role.
Ted Cassidy was actually Hamlet in a great big body. Ted was a very serious actor, very, very talented actor. And for most of his life didn't like being known as Lurch. I think he failed to enjoy, at least for some time, the wonderful performance that he gave. It was classic performance. He got so much into that role. You felt the long suffering interior of this man, his dedication to good manners, his intellect. You found that in him. And I think you could see a lot of talent in Lurch. It's a wonderful performance. And Ted, also did Thing. Lived with a certain dissatisfaction in not playing more conventionally honored kinds of roles. But in my view, he did something utterly unique in creating that character. Very hard for anyone to duplicate what he did. You felt the pain inside Ted and Lurch as he went through his motions, and it was touching and hilarious all at once. Very, very talented. Actually, all of the characters in that show had that double-edged capacity.
Well, as you can see, the Addams are a fun family. Oh, on the surface, there may be certain amusing little differences, but deep down, the Addams family is a lot like your family is. Deep down. Know what I mean?
Composer, arranger, and musician extraordinaire Vic Mizzy was responsible for creating the Addams Family music and lyrics.
Vic Mizzy did contribute to that, to the shot that we're used to seeing of the Addams Family standing there and snapping the fingers. The shot of the Addams Family standing there and snapping the fingers. Vic made quite a contribution to that. He said, snap your fingers. And he said it goes with the song. And he wrote a great tune for that. Vic has written many very good tunes. They're always kind of catchy and bouncy. But I don't think he ever wrote anything any better than the Addams Family theme.
They're creepy and they're kooky, mysterious and spooky. They're all together oaky, the Addams Family. Their house is a museum where people come to see them. They really are a scream, the Addams Family. Neat. Sweet. Petite, so get a witch's shawl on, a broomstick you can crawl on. We're gonna pay a call on the Addams Family. 2 finger snaps and you live in Bel Air. Don't you know that? All right, you'll probably want to know how I got to writing this song. The producer of the film, David Levy, who found the project of the Addams Family, a dear old friend of mine, he wanted me to write the music for the Addams Family. Filmways at that time didn't want to spend any money because they wanted to use canned music, so I said to David Levy, I'll do it for nothing. Let's get it on the air. That's the most important thing.
Time for togetherness and harmony between you and a remarkable family. The Addams Family lives in a typical suburban neighborhood. All the families on the block are pretty average. There's the postman. He's pretty average, too. Oh, for goodness sake, it's only the Addams Family's mailbox.
Is this where the Addams Family lives?
Yeah? You going in there?
I'm the truant officer. They've got 2 kids who have never set foot in school.
Good luck, Charlie.
On the Addams Family, Nat Perrin, who was one of the great comedy writers that we have in Hollywood, like the Marx Brothers pictures and all the rest of those pictures, he became the producer. David Lee became executive producer, and he directed a lot of the things when he knew all the little jokes. But what David Levy did, he gave it the style of Charles Addams, because Charles Addams was a strange, weird guy. I only met him once. When I met him, he says, I've got to tell you something. When I heard the music, he says, if I were a composer, he says, I couldn't have possibly thought of what you did. He says, and I like your themes for Morticia, Gomez, you know, Gomez. You know, that was Gomez, then Morticia. You know, all those little themes. And Lurch, who was Ted Cassidy, you know, Lurch the butler, he used to play the harpsichord. But I was playing it, you know, and he just, you know, I just played it. I gave him the track, and he just sat down and go, for instance, you know. Now, that was the Anxiety Tango, I called it, you know. So all my pictures and all my TV series, I always have thematic motifs going throughout the picture, because the audience ties in subconsciously.
Audiences tied in with the Addams Family almost immediately. The show quickly climbed the ratings charts as kids first became faithful Addams addicts, and then their parents caught on to what the kids were watching every Friday night. As men chose Morticia as their favorite female cast member and newest 60s sex symbol, many women dubbed Lurch as one of the sexiest men on television. As the Addams Family continued its run, most fans began to square off, choosing their favorite cast members and episodes.
I don't have any particular favorites in the Addams Family as far as episodes are concerned. It was one big show to me. And it was almost as though there was no dividing line from show to show. It was all the same show. New things kept happening. It was a sort of a continuous life. We did the show very quickly. We shot a show in 3 days. We might have a read-through and then go shoot it in 3 days, and sometimes we did 2 shows in 5 days.
With such a hectic production schedule, it was no wonder the cast was relieved when new characters were written into the scripts in order to help balance out the workload. Felix Silla, seen out of costume on the left in this rare production still, portrayed the gibberish-speaking hair mass of a freak known as Cousin It. And although Ted Cassidy was still playing 2 parts, Lurch and Thing, his hard work along with the rest of the cast brought about commendable praise from psychiatrists.
There were a number of articles written about the Addams Family, calling it a very healthy show by psychiatrists who may or may not be in a position to know that. But they did say some good things about the Addams Family in that area. I think their reasoning was that although the family was bizarre in its exterior, what was underneath was very healthy. You had a father and mother who had a very healthy married relationship. These people were crazy about each other. And that's healthy. I think that's healthy. There was a supportive attitude in the family from person to person. The kids respected the parents, showed a certain deference to the parents. The parents would do anything for the kids. And so while we may have appeared to be strange or odd on the surface, fundamentally we're very sound.
The sound fundamentals, which were unearthed and upheld by the Addams Family, proved very influential to 60s television. The Addamses were soon joined by another outrageous family on a rival network. Living in a Gothic mansion as well, this family was known as the Munsters. This kooky, spooky CBS network ripoff of the Addams Family included all the classic Universal movie ghouls, Frankenstein's monster, Dracula, the Wolfman, and others.
Someone's coming. keys. I'd like you to meet my date. This is Jack. Oh, Uncle Herman. What's the matter with me anyway?
The only real similarity between the Addams Family and the Munsters was that both shows were spooky parodies of tried and true sitcoms. But unlike the Addams Family, the Munsters relied less on quality script content and more on elaborate makeup and time-consuming sight gags to fill out their half hour of weekly primetime television. CBS executives apparently realized that in order to appeal to the appetites of viewers who wanted a little goulash with their TV diet, they'd have to come up with their own creepy clan to compete with the Addams Family. The move paid off, and the Munsters enjoyed a similar ratings run to that of the Addamses. Both families found themselves doing respectable numbers in the ratings game. The Munsters premiered just 6 days after the Addams Family made its network debut in September of 1964.
Eddie, come down here now. Time for bed.
Not now, Mom. I'm having fun.
Eddie, don't talk fresh to your mother. And stop playing that silly game.
It is not a silly game.
Now you be a good boy. See? Mommy sewed the ear back on your woof woof.
Gee, I don't want to go to bed yet. It's still dark out.
Eddie, you will do as you're told.
Oh, you're always picking on me. You never yell at Marilyn that way.
Just you never mind about Marilyn. You must remember she's not as fortunate as the rest of us. Now you run along on up to bed. And don't forget to close the lid.
The Munsters, which was not in the same class, you know, with the Addams. The Addams Family is very sophisticated. The Munsters were strictly a copy, you know, the way it was strictly production. And the odd thing is I wound up scoring a Munster special years later. They asked me to do it. In fact, when I was scoring the Addams Family, I got an offer from Universal to score the Munsters. But I didn't want to do it because I wanted to be kind of faithful and loyal to David Levy and Filmways, and that was the best move I did because they treated me terrifically.
ABC, meanwhile, was treated terrifically in the ratings by Bewitched, starring Elizabeth Montgomery. This was yet another supernatural sitcom that premiered in 1964. And it dealt with witches wreaking havoc on the lives of mere mortals. Plots were based on the antics that occur when a beautiful blonde witch marries a common, ordinary advertising account executive played by Dick York.
Thursday night at 9, you'll meet Elizabeth Montgomery, a lovely girl who is practically normal in Bewitched.
Once upon a time, there was a typical American girl who happened to bump into a typical red-blooded American boy. They found they had a lot of interests in common. Radio, television, and when the boy found the girl attractive, desirable, irresistible, he did what any red-blooded American boy would do. He asked her to marry him. They had a typical wedding, went on a typical honeymoon, in a typical bridal suite, Except it so happens that this girl is a witch.
You're a what?
I am a witch. A real house-haunting, broom-riding, cauldron-stirring witch.
The power of shows like the Addams Family, Monsters, Bewitched, and all those kind of shows, and even the better type of shows along that line, especially the Addams Family, Green Acres, for instance. The people who were involved with that did one very important thing outside of getting great writers of comedy. They made the characters important.
But the Addams Family's importance would be felt for only 2 short years in ABC's primetime lineup. The last show aired on September 2nd, 1966. It was mysteriously canceled by demographics-conscious executives who felt the era of monster-crazed television was over when The Munsters was canceled at CBS. But the Addams Family would live on for more than 25 years in daily reruns, which were eventually seen throughout the world.
The Addams Family has played in many different countries. I remember a friend of mine telling me about going to a hotel in Japan, flicking on the TV set and seeing me speak Japanese. He said it was good Japanese.
We were in Puerto Rico, in Puerto Rico, and we were at the hotel, and they're showing the Addams Family, but they dubbed it in Spanish. So John Astin saying, and she said, you know, all this stuff.
Now as universally appreciated as the cartoons of Charles Addams, the Addams Family began to enjoy a resurgence of popularity brought on by the impact of reruns on new audiences. They even returned to cartoon form in the mid-70s, but this time they were animated in full color for Saturday morning television. The Addams Family cartoon series was produced by Hanna-Barbera, and it premiered on September 8, 1973. It ran until August 30th of 1975. And although most of the original television cast had moved on to other projects, there were a few cast tie-ins on the new cartoon show. For instance, the voice of Uncle Fester was provided by none other than Jackie Coogan, who was semi-retired at the time. And Ted Cassidy played Lurch. But strangely enough, the voice of Pugsley was provided by eventual Academy Award-winning actress Jodie Foster for the run of the weekly animated show. Just like the primetime series, the Addams Family cartoon show enjoyed only 2 years on television, but it helped introduce an even younger audience to the characters inspired by the genius of Charles Addams. As the television series continues to enjoy a lasting place in the hearts of rerun watchers worldwide, it has also created a sort of Addams Family mania, which culminated in the pre-production of an Addams Family big-time feature film in the late 1980s. By 1990, Orion Pictures had begun shooting The Addams Family in Los Angeles, and for the most part it was a highly guarded production. The film company had even built a replica of the family's decaying mansion in the hills above Burbank, California, for exterior shots. This time around, none of the TV series cast was involved. Raul Julia and Angelica Houston played Gomez and Morticia, while character actor Christopher Lloyd, who had risen to fame on the TV series Taxi and in the Back to the Future movie trilogy, was brought in to play Uncle Fester. Pugsley and Wednesday were played by newcomers Jimmy Workman and Christina Ricci, and they took to the Addams Family style with the greatest of ease. Many of the gags and nuances from the original cropped up in the movie. Gomez's hobby of blowing up trains was exploited in the feature, for instance, as was his cigar smoking and carnal appetite for Morticia. Interestingly enough, none of these elements were ever part of the Charles Addams cartoons. They were bits of business concocted by John Astin for the Gomez role. Even more derivative are the character names, all of which were created specifically for the TV series. In 1991, coming attractions for the Addams Family movie started hitting theater screens with the promise, it's not the same old thing. Now, audiences were once again seeing their favorite television sitcom characters. But now, they were in color. And anticipation was high that the new Addams Family movie would deliver the same kind of spooky fun as the classic ABC television series. There were, however, some fundamental changes from the original TV program. For example, the issue of lineage. In the 60s TV show, Uncle Fester was supposed to be Morticia's uncle. In the movie, Fester is actually Gomez's long-lost brother. In addition to the 7 traditional characters, the movie promised a slew of bizarre new personalities for Addams Family fans to enjoy. A set-piece finale features such characters as a hip-looking hunchback, a 2-headed two-stepper, and a multi-fingered freak. Of course, all the familiar faces from the TV show are on hand, including the series' most popular guest star, Cousin It. The movie promised to be just as creepy and kooky as the TV show, and with the added production values of horror movie-style makeup, spectacular black-on-black wardrobe, and top-notch special effects. If nothing else, the film resembles a 90s homage to old-time haunted house thrillers. The movie was expected to deliver, as the Addams Family feature film budget came in at well over $25 million. And finally, with the publication of a brand new book chronicling the history of these famous frightsters, the Addams Family is even more indelibly etched on the American collective psyche. With Charles Addams's unforgettable characters back in print, the family has come full circle.
Not a day goes by, honestly, that I don't hear somebody snap their fingers and say, "Hey, Gomez!" Wherever I go, everywhere I went, people were asking me about the Addams Family. And it's interesting, I have lived with the Addams Family for 25 years. I have done many, many things since. And we did the show for only 2 years. But there was something about the quality of what was done at that time that has lasted for all these years.
They're creepy and they're kooky, mysterious and spooky. They're all together oaky, the Addams Family. Their house is a museum where people come to see them. They really are a scream, the Addams Family. Neat. Sweet. Petite, so get a witch's shawl on, a broomstick you can crawl on. We're gonna pay a call on the Addams Family.